You live with a low hum of tension beneath everything. You scan faces for approval before your own body registers breath. You edit your words in real time. You rehearse the next moment while the current one slips through your hands. Every choice feels like a performance graded by an audience you cannot see but always feel. It is not vanity. It is survival that got sophisticated. To be honest, this has been your way of staying safe for a very long time. Somewhere early, attention felt like oxygen and disapproval felt like a threat. So you learned to bend. You learned to read the room before you read yourself. You learned to become whoever the moment wanted. The world praised you for being reasonable, polite, adaptable, and inside a quiet ache grew heavier each year. Most psychologists will not tell you this, but the habit of caring what they think is not a bad attitude to be fixed. It is a nervous system strategy that once protected you. It kept you connected when honesty felt dangerous. It kept you included when the cost of being real felt too high. The bill arrives later as anxiety, resentment, and a life that looks stable from the outside while feeling hollow from the inside. You are tired of seeking permission to exist. You are tired of borrowing your worth from other people's faces. You are tired of waking up already braced for judgment that may never come. You long for the quiet of being yourself without an audience. You long for a day that does not require performance. By the end of this video, you will understand why your pain is a gift, why the compulsion to be approved is a map back to where you left yourself, and why stopping the performance does not make you reckless. It makes you real. To be honest, the idea of simply not caring what they think is sold like a light switch. Flip it and suddenly you are free. That promise flatters the ego and ignores the nervous system. You did not start caring because of a slogan, so you will not stop because of one. The pattern lives deeper than mindset. It lives in a body that learned early that approval meant safety and disapproval meant danger. The body does not surrender a survival strategy because a book told it to relax. You tried the confidence hacks. You repeated affirmations until the words lost meaning. You read about boundaries and practice lines in the mirror. You learned frameworks and scripts and still felt the same tightening in the chest the moment someone frowned or misunderstood you. The problem is not ignorance. The problem is that you were trained to outsource yourself to the audience. When belonging was conditional, performance became oxygen. You can understand this intellectually and still feel the old alarm ringing the moment you risk being real. Most psychologists will not tell you this because it sounds unromantic, but approval seeking is not a flaw to shame. It is an intelligent adaptation to an environment that punished authenticity. Your system made a deal. It traded depth for acceptance. It traded spontaneity for predictability. It worked for years. The cost arrives as chronic vigilance, a life bent around other people's stories about you, and a slow erosion of the voice that once knew what it wanted before it learned to ask for permission. Here is what they do not tell their patients. You can upgrade the costume of the false self and still live the same prison. You can rename it confidence, polish it as personal brand, call it authenticity, and still perform if the audience remains your God. The metrics change. The dependency does not. There is a world of difference between self-expression and impression management dressed up as self-expression. One feeds the soul, the other feeds the fear. This might sound harsh, but much of what passes as empowerment is just better theater. The pose is louder, the captions are longer, the mask is more expensive, and underneath nothing shifts. The inner critic, which Freud would call the superego, continues to score every move. The old family script continues to dictate what is allowed. The same childhood contract whispers that love requires compliance, that being misunderstood equals exile, that being ordinary equals failure. Until that contract is seen and rewritten, every technique becomes another layer of armor. You were not misled because you were foolish. You were misled because the culture profits when you keep performing. Workplaces reward the agreeable and the tireless. Families reward the child who carries the weather for everyone else. School rewards those who read the teacher's face more than they read their own body. Even therapy can become another stage if it chases insight without building safety. You did everything right according to the rules you were given. The rules were designed to keep you obedient to the gaze. The mind tells a story that sounds reasonable. If I plan enough, explain enough, defend enough, everyone will understand me, and then I can rest. The nervous system hears a different command. Stay on guard, scan the room, anticipate disappointment, rehearse your alibi. You cannot outthink an alarm that was wired before language. The cure is not more explanation to others. The cure is a repaired bond with the parts of you that were exiled to win approval. Jung would call these exiles shadow. They are the traits you hid because they threaten belonging, anger that protects dignity, desire that reveals direction, grief that keeps you honest about loss. Each time you suppress them to look agreeable, the shadow stored them for later. That storage did not disappear. It waits beneath your curated self and speaks through anxiety, numbness, and the sense that your life feels accurate but not true. To be honest, the fixation on what they think is a clever detour around the real task. If the audience decides your worth, you never have to decide. If the comments define your identity, you never have to stand inside your own verdict. That abdication felt safe when you were small. In adulthood, it guarantees resentment. You cannot love a self you keep outsourcing for evaluation. Not everyone is ready to hear this, but there is no path to freedom that avoids disappointing people who benefit from your performance. The moment you stop curating yourself for their comfort, some relationships will wobble. The ones built on your compliance will protest. The ones built on your essence will steady themselves and meet you. Approval is addictive because it offers quick relief. Integrity is quieter and slower. It grows like bone, not like fireworks. But there is something even scarier, and we will get to that. The scariest part is not their judgment. It is the silence that arrives when you no longer let their eyes tell you who you are. If these words resonate, subscribe to the channel. More people need to hear the truth they're being denied. To be honest, approval seeking is less about ego and more about an old survival contract written before you had language. In a home where love withdrew when you were loud, angry, different, or simply inconvenient, the body learned that harmony equals safety. The nervous system paired belonging with self-editing. That pairing matured into a style of living that looks considerate on the surface and feels like erasure on the inside. You trained your attention to live outside your skin, scanning faces and tones, predicting what would keep the peace. It worked. You stayed connected. The cost was gradual invisibility. Most psychologists won't tell you this plainly, but what you call people-pleasing is the behavioral face of an attachment wound. When early connection depended on compliance, the child built a persona that could be loved. Jung called that persona a necessary mask. There is nothing wrong with a mask until it becomes welded to your skin. Underneath sits the shadow, which is everything you exiled to protect inclusion. Anger that protects dignity, desire that points toward a real life, grief that tells the truth about loss. The more you curate yourself for approval, the heavier this shadow grows. It does not disappear. It waits and speaks through anxiety, burnout, and a strange feeling that your days are accurate but not true. Freud would name the inner judge the superego. Think of it as a private critic formed from the rules, tones, and punishments you absorbed. Its job is to prevent exile by punishing any sign of authenticity that once risked rejection. This judge scores your sentences before you speak. It edits messages before you send. It rehearses alibis for choices you have not made yet. It does not respond to logic because it does not serve logic. It serves the old contract that said survival requires conformity. Here is what they do not tell their patients. The more you chase approval to quiet the critic, the stronger the critic becomes. Every external nod temporarily soothes the alarm, and secretly confirms the original rule that worth must be earned. That is why the relief never lasts. The system loops until you interrupt it at the level of belief and bodily memory, not at the level of another clever sentence. There is also a more subtle layer: projection. You place disowned parts of yourself onto other people's opinions and then fight those opinions as if they hold the key to your life. When you fear your own anger, you see anger in their eyes even when it is not there. When you distrust your desire, you imagine their judgment before they have spoken. The audience becomes a screen for inner conflict. Withdrawing projections is a sober act. It means admitting that much of what you fear in their minds actually lives in yours. The family script matters. In many systems, a child becomes the harmonizer, the one who regulates the household weather. The role looks like maturity and hides a constant state of hypervigilance. Schools and workplaces reward this vigilance. They call it professionalism. They call it team fit. You receive promotions for the same trait that numbs your soul. Praise reinforces the mask. The longer the mask earns you safety and status, the riskier authenticity feels. This might sound harsh, but confidence built on performance is still dependence. You can rebrand the persona as leadership, personal brand, even authenticity, and nothing fundamental changes if your nervous system still treats other people's reactions as oxygen. The language is upgraded, the prison remains. Now the paradox: freedom does not begin by convincing the world to approve of your real self. Freedom begins by grieving the years you bartered your real self for stability. Grief is not a setback. Grief is the nervous system discharging the stored cost of performance. The body shakes, the breath shallows, and a wave of sadness rises without a clear story. That is not failure. That is thaw. You cannot become real without mourning who you pretended to be. Jung offered a path called individuation, which is a heavy word for a simple idea. You become whole by integrating what you rejected. That means you learn to feel the heat of your own anger without acting it out or apologizing for its existence. You allow desire to inform direction without dressing it as duty. You let grief educate your limits instead of hiding it behind good manners. Integration is not a speech. It is a series of lived moments where you choose coherence over performance. Most psychologists will not tell you this because it sounds unmarketable, but the way out runs through discomfort. You will be misunderstood and remain steady. You will disappoint someone you love and remain kind to yourself. You will stop explaining every boundary and discover that silence can be an act of self-respect. The nervous system learns safety not from ideas, but from surviving small doses of risk. You gradually teach your body that disapproval is a sensation that peaks and settles, not a catastrophe that erases you. Complexes, in Jung's language, are clusters of memory and emotion that hijack your behavior. The approval complex activates when a threat to belonging appears. Your heart races, your thoughts sprint toward a rescue plan. You apologize for existing before anyone makes an accusation. Naming the complex as it activates creates a thin gap. In that gap, you can breathe, place a hand on the sternum, and state the immediate truth. My chest is tight. My jaw is braced. I feel the pull to perform. Honesty interrupts automation. Repeated honesty rewires expectation. There is another layer that feels almost spiritual and is still completely practical. When you no longer outsource identity to the audience, you reclaim authorship. Winnicott called it moving from false self to true self. True does not mean perfect. True means internally referenced. Your choices arise from felt coherence rather than predicted applause. The external world may not applaud. Over time, you stop needing it to. Not everyone is ready to hear this, but caring less about what they think does not begin with defiance. It begins with consent to feel shame without obeying it. Shame will flare when you step out of role. Let it rise and fall. Shame is a weather pattern, not a verdict. Each cycle you endure without retreat becomes a proof point to the body that you can survive being seen as you are. The culture will offer faster paths, more polish, louder poses, You can take them and you will return to the same loop. The slower path asks for patient exposure to small acts of honesty. You say the unspectacular truth. You stop padding it with justifications. You breathe through the aftershocks. You notice that the world does not end. Integrity grows in these quiet experiments. But there is a cost. Some relationships have been built on your performance. Those will wobble, a few will fall. That loss hurts and it frees you. The ones that remain begin to meet the person who was hiding beneath politeness. Connection becomes thinner and truer. The nervous system recognizes this difference as relief that feels like emptiness at first. Emptiness is space asking to be filled with your life. And here comes the most painful truth. The freedom you seek will never be delivered by their approval. It is delivered by your decision to stop negotiating your reality with the audience you carry in your head. To be honest, change begins in the smallest private moments where no applause is available. Freedom is not a feeling you wait for. Freedom is a practice you repeat until the nervous system learns a new story about who you are. You do not argue with the old contract. You outlive it through consistent, quiet acts that prove to your body that disapproval does not equal death. Begin with the pause that interrupts performance. When a request arrives, let your first sentence be simple and clean. Let me think about it. That sentence buys space, and space is where truth appears. In that space, bring attention into the body. Notice jaw, throat, chest, belly. Name what is present without analysis. Tightness in the jaw, heat in the chest, hollow in the belly. The body is voting long before the mouth speaks. You honor that vote by listening. Most psychologists will not tell you this plainly, but the cure for approval addiction is graduated exposure to being misunderstood. Choose a low-stakes moment each day and allow a clean boundary without the cushion of over-explaining. Say less than your anxiety demands. Let silence do part of the work. Your system will flare with shame, then settle. Each repetition tells the nervous system that tension peaks and drops, and that you remain. Create a shadow ledger for 1 month. Each evening, write 3 short lines. 1 line of gratitude that does not perform for anyone. 1 line naming a moment you noticed yourself curating to look acceptable. 1 line of permission that you will carry into tomorrow. Gratitude, curation, permission. 3 lines, no drama, steady honesty. The aim is not elegant writing. The aim is fidelity to what is real. Practice withdrawing projections in real time. When you feel judged, state the internal translation without blaming the room. I imagine you see me as careless. I imagine you think I am too much. Then add the correction. That thought lives in me. Place a hand on the sternum, breathe out longer than you breathe in, and return ownership to yourself. You cannot control the audience in your head. You can stop treating it like a god. Not everyone is ready to hear this, but you will need a ritual for the surge that follows honesty. After a boundary, do nothing for 1 minute. Feel the impulse to fix the other person's experience and do not obey it. Sip water, walk slowly to a window. Count 5 exhales with your eyes on a single point in the distance. Completion signals safety to a vigilant system. You are teaching the body that you can remain with yourself after truth. Choose a weekly practice of deliberate ordinariness. Wear the simple outfit. Post nothing. Leave a message unembellished. Let a pause exist in a conversation without filling it with competence. This is not self-neglect. This is detox from the spike of attention that once felt like oxygen. Ordinary is where authenticity stops needing costume. Set an integrity line for the week in 1 sentence. I do not explain my no beyond 1 clean sentence. I do not defend decisions that are aligned. I do not barter away rest to purchase approval. Keep the sentence visible. When the old pull arrives, read it aloud before you answer. Spoken truth recruits the body, not just the intellect. Rebuild consent with your anger, desire, and grief. Anger becomes a boundary when named without attack. Desire becomes direction when admitted without apology. Grief becomes permission to stop performing what no longer fits. Sit for 10 quiet breaths and let one of these guests enter the room each day. You do not need to justify the visit. You need to bear it. Tend to relationships with a clear audit. Notice who grows steadier as you become more yourself, and who grows agitated when you stop managing their comfort. You do not punish anyone. You calibrate distance to match truth. Proximity becomes a reward for mutual reality, not an arrangement maintained by your self-erasure. Here is what they do not tell their patients. The first waves of relief feel like boredom before they feel like freedom. Your system misses the thrill of constant evaluation. Treat the quiet as rehabilitation, not as emptiness to be filled. Walk without headphones. Eat one meal without multitasking. Let the ordinary moments prove that life holds you without an audience. End each night with the smallest closing ritual. Hand on chest. I chose coherence over performance at least once today. I felt the shame wave and I remained. I am allowed to exist without permission slips. The words are simple. The repetition is the medicine. If you saw yourself in these words, write in the comments, "I no longer run from pain." Let's see how many are ready for the truth. You begin to notice a different kind of quiet. Not the silence of holding your breath for approval, but the steadiness of breathing without an audience. Your day still contains work, bills, messy conversations, yet something fundamental shifts. You move from performance to participation. You speak as yourself instead of about yourself. You do not chase alignment, you inhabit it. To be honest, freedom feels ordinary before it feels grand. The victories are small and real. You step away from a conversation before you start polishing your sentences. You let a misunderstanding exist long enough for truth to settle inside you. Your spine remembers its natural length. The body trusts that it can remain even when someone else does not offer applause. This is not defiance. This is consent to be who you are without negotiation. Some ties loosen as your center returns. That loss stings. It also clarifies. The connections that remain grow simpler and truer, built on presence rather than performance. You notice laughter that arrives without effort. You notice rest that is not a bargain with future productivity. You notice desire pointing quietly in a direction that matches your life. The space that once felt empty begins to feel like room. You are not alone in this. There are others learning the same slow courage, choosing coherence over spectacle, choosing to disappoint expectations rather than abandon themselves again. We meet one another not in perfection, but in honesty. That is how community forms, not through matching masks, but through shared relief that the mask can finally come off. If this video changed something in you, write, "I accept my shadow." Make it your vow to yourself.